Emily had always been the kind of woman who blended quietly into the background. She wasn't shy exactly, but she preferred calm places and familiar faces. Life had taught her to keep her head down and avoid unnecessary attention. Her days were simple. Wake up, go to work at the local bookstore, come home, cook dinner, and spend her evenings reading or watching documentaries. But deep inside, she carried a quiet emptiness, a feeling that something in her life was missing. One evening, while scrolling through her phone, she came across a flyer for a nearby karate dojo offering beginner classes. The picture showed smiling students in white uniforms looking confident and strong. Emily stared at it for a long moment. She had always admired people who practiced martial arts, their discipline, balance, and inner peace. After a few minutes of hesitation, she whispered to herself, "Maybe this is what I need." The next afternoon, she gathered the courage to visit the dojo. The moment she stepped inside, she felt nervous. The air was thick with energy. Students were practicing punches and kicks, their movements sharp and powerful. The rhythmic sound of feet hitting mats echoed through the hall. Emily, dressed in jeans and a plain gray sweater, felt completely out of place among them. A tall instructor with a black belt around his waist noticed her and smiled politely. "You must be new," he said. "First time here?" Emily nodded quickly. "Yes. I've never done anything like this before." "Don't worry," he said kindly. "Everyone starts somewhere. Come in, take off your shoes, and have a seat. We'll get you started." As Emily sat down, she felt the eyes of some students on her. A few of them exchanged looks and whispered to each other. One of them, a confident young man with a sharp jawline, chuckled and said under his breath, "She looks like she couldn't punch a pillow." Emily heard it, but she didn't react. She simply looked around, taking in the dojo's atmosphere. Posters of karate masters, a row of trophies, and the faint smell of sweat mixed with incense. When class began, the instructor showed basic stances and punches. Emily tried her best to follow along, but her movements were awkward. Her balance wobbled and her punches lacked strength. The black belts at the back of the class smirked each time she made a mistake. She pretended not to notice, but deep inside, she felt the sting of embarrassment. Still, she refused to give up. Each time she fell out of form, she took a deep breath and tried again. Her determination caught the instructor's eye. He nodded approvingly, sensing that beneath her nervousness was someone willing to push her limits. During a short break, one of the other beginners approached her. "You're doing fine," the girl said kindly. "Don't let them bother you. They always act like that with newcomers." Emily smiled softly. "Thanks. I'm just trying to learn. It's harder than it looks." As the class continued, Emily started to feel more comfortable. She began to understand the rhythm of the movements, the coordination between breath, mind, and body. It reminded her of something she had forgotten long ago, the calm focus she used to have when her father taught her self-defense as a child. She could almost hear his voice guiding her. "Stay calm, Em. Power isn't in strength, it's in control." By the end of the class, her hair was messy, her arms ached, and her legs trembled. But for the first time in years, she felt alive. The instructor clapped his hands and gathered everyone around. "Good work, everyone. Remember, karate isn't about being stronger than others. It's about being stronger than you were yesterday." Those words stayed with Emily as she bowed and left the dojo. Outside, the evening air felt cool against her flushed face. She walked home slowly, her heart full of both exhaustion and quiet pride. She didn't know what the future held, but something inside her had awakened, a spark of strength she hadn't felt in years. Behind her, through the dojo's window, a few black belts still stood talking. One of them smirked again, saying, "She won't last a week." But if they had looked closely, they might have noticed the determined look in Emily's eyes as she walked away. She wasn't there just to learn karate. She was there to rediscover herself. And soon they would all learn that the simple woman they laughed at was anything but ordinary. The next week, Emily returned to the dojo. Her muscles still ached from the first class, but her spirit was stronger than ever. She had spent the past few days practicing in her living room, awkwardly copying moves she remembered from YouTube videos and from her father's old lessons. Every time she stumbled, she smiled instead of getting angry. She was learning, and that made her feel alive. When she entered the dojo, the room fell silent for a moment. Some of the regular students turned to look at her, surprised that she had come back. Most beginners never returned after their first class, especially the ones who were mocked or laughed at. But there she was, quiet, calm, and ready. The instructor, Sensei David, greeted her warmly. "Good to see you again, Emily," he said. "Not many people come back after the first week. That says a lot about your determination." "Thank you," Emily replied softly. "I really want to learn." But not everyone shared Sensei David's kindness. In the corner of the dojo stood Mark, the same tall black belt who had laughed at her before. He was surrounded by two of his friends, both wearing black belts with golden stripes. They were skilled fighters, but they carried a different kind of energy, prideful, intimidating, and a little cruel. Mark folded his arms and smirked. "Look who's back," he said, just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Didn't think you'd survive one class?" Emily pretended not to hear him. She placed her bag down, bowed respectfully toward the mat, and joined the warm-up line. She had learned long ago that silence was sometimes the strongest answer. But Mark wasn't done. During stretching, he whispered to one of his friends, "Bet she's only here for attention." They chuckled quietly, glancing her way. Emily felt the heat rise to her face but focused on her breathing. "Ignore them," she told herself. "You're not here to impress anyone." The class began with basic drills, punches, blocks, and kicks. Emily worked hard, her movements sharper and more confident than before. But every mistake she made earned a snicker or an eye roll from the black belts at the back. The atmosphere, once exciting, now felt heavy. It wasn't just training anymore. It was a silent test of patience. After an hour, Sensei David called for sparring practice. "Today," he announced, "we'll focus on control and respect. Advanced students will pair with beginners to help guide them." Emily's stomach twisted as the students began pairing off. She hoped she'd be matched with another beginner, maybe the kind girl from last week. But before she could move, Mark called out, "Sensei, I'll take her." The room went quiet. Everyone knew what that meant. Mark wasn't offering to help. He wanted to humiliate her. Sensei David hesitated, looking between them. "Mark, remember, control is key." "Of course, Sensei," Mark said innocently, but his grin said otherwise. Emily stood across from him on the mat. She bowed, as was tradition, and whispered softly, "Let's keep it light." "I'm still new." Mark smirked. "Don't worry, I'll go easy on you." When Sensei shouted "Hajime," the signal to begin, Mark moved fast. Too fast. His first strike wasn't a gentle tap. It was a strong push that sent Emily stumbling backward. The crowd laughed quietly. Mark's friends smirked. "Oops," he said mockingly. "Guess I misjudged my strength." Emily steadied herself. Her heart raced, but she didn't back away. The next time he lunged, she dodged slightly, just enough to avoid the hit. Mark blinked, surprised. He attacked again, this time faster. Emily ducked, feeling the air of his strike pass over her shoulder. A small flicker of something returned to her. Focus, instinct, muscle memory. Mark's grin faded. He wasn't used to being dodged. The laughter from his friends stopped. He tried again, throwing a fake punch to distract her, but she moved with fluid grace. This time her father's words echoed in her head. Power isn't about hitting hard. It's about knowing when not to. She didn't fight back. She simply moved, avoiding his strikes again and again until his frustration began to show. Sweat formed on his brow. The crowd murmured. This wasn't going the way he expected. Finally, Mark threw a wide swing, overconfident and angry. Emily stepped aside effortlessly, letting his momentum carry him forward. He stumbled, catching himself before falling. A ripple of laughter spread through the dojo, not cruel laughter this time, but surprise and disbelief. Emily took a step, back bowed respectfully and said, "I think that's enough practice for today." Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp with quiet fire. Sensei David nodded approvingly. "Excellent control, Emily. That's how a martial artist thinks." Mark looked down, humiliated. His friends said nothing. For the first time, they saw the quiet woman not as a weak outsider, but as someone who carried something powerful within. Discipline, patience, and an inner strength that didn't need to shout to be heard. As class ended, Emily gathered her things. The same girl from last week approached her again, smiling. "That was amazing. You didn't even hit him, but you won." Emily smiled softly. Winning doesn't always mean fighting. Sometimes it just means not letting them break you. She walked out of the dojo into the cool night air, her steps steady and confident. Behind her, whispers filled the room. Some said she was lucky. Others said she was smarter than anyone thought. But Mark knew the truth. She was more than lucky. She was dangerous in a way no one could yet understand. Because beneath her gentle nature, Emily carried something fierce, and sooner or later, the whole dojo would see it. That night after her second class, Emily walked home under the pale glow of the streetlights. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the rush of energy still moving through her veins. The sound of the dojo, the echo of Mark's frustrated breathing, and the quiet murmurs of respect from the students, all of it replayed in her mind. For the first time in years, she had felt something she had long buried deep inside her. When she entered her small apartment, the familiar silence wrapped around her like an old blanket. She dropped her gym bag near the door, made herself some tea, and sat by the window. Outside, the world went on, cars passing, people laughing, but Emily was somewhere else entirely, lost in memory. Her eyes drifted to the corner of her living room, where an old wooden box sat under a stack of books. For years, she had avoided opening it, but tonight something inside her whispered that it was time. Slowly, she got up and brought the box to the table. Dust covered the lid. When she lifted it, a faint scent of sandalwood filled the air. Inside lay a pair of worn hand wraps, faded and frayed at the edges. Beneath them was a small photograph. Emily, around 16, standing beside a strong man with kind eyes and a proud smile. Her father. He had been a soldier, disciplined and brave, but more than that, he had been her teacher. She remembered their backyard training sessions, the sound of gloves hitting the punching bag, and his calm voice guiding her through every move. "Balance, Em," he would say gently. "Strength without control is chaos. Remember that." He had taught her Muay Thai from the time she was 12, not because he wanted her to fight, but because he wanted her to never be afraid. She had been small and shy, often teased by boys at school, and her father believed confidence was the best armor she could wear. She became good, very good. Her speed surprised even him sometimes. She remembered how he'd laugh proudly when she'd block his kicks. "You've got fire in you, kid," he'd say. "One day you'll be stronger than me." But that fire had dimmed years ago. It happened one rainy evening. Her father had entered a local underground fight, not for glory, but to help a friend who owed money to the wrong people. He promised Emily he'd be home before dinner. He never came back. There was an accident, one that took his life instantly. The shock shattered Emily's world. For weeks she couldn't eat or sleep. The sound of gloves hitting the bag haunted her dreams. She packed away everything that reminded her of training, her wraps, her gloves, even the small trophy she'd won in her first amateur match, and locked them inside that box. She swore never to fight again. Years passed. She focused on living a quiet life, working hard, staying invisible. But deep inside, the fighter never really disappeared. She was only sleeping, and now, after what happened at the dojo with Mark, with the whispers, with the test of her patience, that sleeping part of her had begun to wake up again. Emily touched the hand wraps in the box. Her fingers traced the rough fabric. "You'd probably laugh at me now, Dad," she whispered, scared to even step into a dojo. "But I'm trying." A tear slid down her cheek, but she smiled. It wasn't sadness, it was release. She could feel his presence in the quiet of the room, in the rhythm of her breathing, in the pulse of her heart that still beat like a warrior's drum. The next morning, she woke early. The city was still half asleep. She made coffee, tied her hair into a bun, and for the first time in years wrapped her hands in those old bandages. They felt strange at first. Tight, worn, but familiar, like shaking hands with an old friend. She stood in front of her mirror and took a deep breath. Her stance was awkward at first, but soon, her body remembered what her mind had forgotten. Her fists moved in slow, deliberate motions, jab, cross, hook, elbow. The air around her seemed to hum with energy. She moved like someone rediscovering her own heartbeat. Every strike released a memory, every breath a promise to herself. She wasn't training to fight others this time. She was training to fight her fear, her grief, her silence. By the time the sun rose, sweat dripped down her temples and her arms felt heavy. But she smiled, a rare, genuine smile that reached her eyes. She poured herself a glass of water, sat on the floor and whispered softly, "I'm not done yet." At that exact moment across town, Mark was telling his friends how the new girl had embarrassed him. He laughed it off, but inside he was unsettled. Something about her composure, her calm eyes had shaken him. He didn't know who she really was or what she was capable of, but soon he would. Because Emily wasn't just a simple woman. She was a storm waiting for the right moment to rise again. And when she did, no one in that dojo would ever forget her name. The next few weeks passed quietly, but the air inside the dojo had changed. Every time Emily walked through the doors, the room grew just a little quieter. The same people who once whispered behind her back now watched her closely. There was something about her calm confidence that unsettled them. She never bragged, never tried to stand out. She came early, bowed respectfully, and trained with quiet focus. While others showed off their power, Emily practiced balance, precision, and control. The sound of her strikes was clean and sharp. Each punch landed like the beat of a steady drum. Even Sensei David began using her as an example for the new students. But not everyone liked that. Mark hadn't forgotten what happened during sparring. His pride still burned. To him, Emily wasn't just another student, she was a reminder of his humiliation. Every time he saw her bow politely or move with calm grace, something inside him twisted. He told himself she had just been lucky, that she'd only embarrassed him by chance. But deep down he knew the truth. One evening after class, he stood near the punching bags, pretending to train while watching her talk with Sensei David. The sensei was smiling, clearly impressed. "You've made great progress, Emily," he said. "You move like someone who's trained before." Emily smiled faintly. "Maybe a little. It's been a long time." Mark's jaw tightened. "A long time, huh?" He interrupted, stepping closer. "Then maybe it's time we see what you really remember." The room went silent. A few students looked up, sensing the tension. Sensei David turned toward him. "Mark, this isn't the time," but Mark ignored him. "Let's have a proper match, you and me, this Friday during open training." His tone was polite, but his eyes were sharp with challenge. Emily hesitated. She didn't want drama. She wasn't there to prove anything. "I don't think that's necessary," she said calmly. "Oh, come on," Mark pressed loud enough for everyone to hear. "You handled yourself well last time. I'm curious to see what you can really do when you're not just dodging." The other students murmured. Some looked excited, others uncomfortable. It wasn't normal for a senior black belt to call out a beginner, but pride often blinds reason. Sensei David stepped in. "Mark, you're out of line. This dojo teaches respect." Mark bowed slightly, though his smirk ruined the gesture. "Of course, Sensei. It's just a friendly challenge. Nothing more." Emily looked at him for a long moment. Part of her wanted to walk away, to prove she was above such childishness. But another part deep inside whispered something else. "You can't run from every challenge." "Not anymore," she nodded once. "Fine, Friday." A spark of surprise flickered in Mark's eyes. He hadn't expected her to agree so easily. "Good," he said. "Let's make it interesting." When she left that evening, whispers followed her out the door. Everyone was talking about it. The beginner challenging a black belt. Some felt bad for her. Others were eager to see her fail. But Emily didn't care. She wasn't fighting to prove her strength. She was fighting to reclaim something she'd lost years ago, her courage. That week she trained alone in her apartment. Every night after work she pushed aside her coffee table, tied her old hand wraps, and practiced in silence. Her movements became faster, sharper, smoother. The rhythm of her breath matched the rhythm of her strikes. Each jab carried the memory of her father's lessons. Each kick echoed the sound of his voice. "Don't fight with anger, Em. Fight with purpose." Friday came quickly. The dojo buzzed with energy. Students from all levels had gathered to watch. Even a few parents stayed after class, curious about the rumored match. Emily walked in wearing her plain white jai, her brown hair tied neatly back. She looked calm, almost too calm, like a still pond before a storm. Mark stood on the opposite side of the mat, his black belt tied tightly, his smile confident and sharp. Sensei David sighed, knowing there was no stopping it now. "Fine," he said firmly. "No full contact. Respect the dojo, respect each other. Bow, then begin." They bowed. For a few seconds, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then Mark struck first. His moves were fast and aggressive. Kicks, punches, sharp spins meant to intimidate. Emily dodged, her movements fluid and effortless, her face unreadable. She didn't strike back. She was studying him, watching his rhythm, waiting for the right moment. Mark grew impatient. "Come on," he shouted, swinging a powerful roundhouse kick. This time Emily blocked it perfectly and stepped inside his guard. With a sudden twist, she hooked his leg and used his own momentum against him. He hit the mat, hard. The crowd gasped. Mark scrambled to his feet, red-faced. "Lucky move," he muttered, and attacked again. But Emily's movements were like water, flowing, shifting, unstoppable. She dodged, countered, and redirected every attack with perfect timing. The more he fought, the more desperate he became. Then, in one clean motion, she spun behind him, placed her hand gently on his shoulder, and whispered, "Calm down." He froze. He could feel it, the control in her movement, the quiet strength she carried. She could have hurt him, but she didn't. Sensei David clapped once. "Enough." Mark stood there breathing hard, sweat dripping down his face. Emily bowed respectfully, her eyes calm and clear. The dojo erupted in whispers. Some were in awe, others in disbelief. Mark looked around, humiliated again, but this time, even his friends stayed silent. Emily stepped off the mat, untied her belt, and said softly, "It wasn't luck." And as she left, everyone watched her go, not as a beginner, not as an outsider, but as something else entirely. The quiet woman they once mocked had just become the dojo's mystery, a calm storm with the heart of a fierce fighter. The next morning, sunlight streamed through Emily's curtains, but she was already awake. Her muscles ached, yet her mind felt sharper than ever. What happened the night before wasn't just a sparring match, it was a moment of truth. She had faced fear, pride, and doubt all at once and stood firm. For the first time in years, she felt like herself again. As she tied her shoes for work, she caught her reflection in the mirror. Her expression was calm, but her eyes looked different, stronger, brighter. The timid woman who once walked into the dojo now carried the quiet confidence of someone who had rediscovered her strength. At the bookstore, her co-workers noticed the change too. "You seem different lately," one of them said. "Did something good happen?" Emily smiled faintly. "Maybe I just stopped being afraid." But while she moved on peacefully, the dojo buzzed with restless energy. Word of the fight had spread faster than anyone expected. Videos secretly recorded on phones were already being passed around among students and shared on martial arts forums. Comments flooded in. "Who is that woman? She moves like a pro. She's no beginner." By the time Emily returned for her next class, people looked at her differently. No one smirked this time. Conversations hushed when she entered. Even the black belts nodded at her respectfully. She didn't seek attention, but it followed her anyway. Mark, however, couldn't let it go. Every time he saw her, a flicker of anger crossed his face. He had been the dojo's star student for years, but now all anyone could talk about was her. His pride had turned into obsession. During warm-ups, Sensei David called for paired drills. To Emily's surprise, he chose her to demonstrate techniques with him in front of the class. "Emily, step forward," he said. "Show them the defensive stance we practiced." Her heart pounded, but she obeyed. She stood opposite the sensei, calm and focused. When he moved, she reacted smoothly, blocking, shifting, and countering with precision. The class watched in awe as she moved like water, her balance unshakable. When the demonstration ended, the dojo broke into quiet applause. Sensei David smiled. "This is what discipline looks like," he said. "Remember, karate isn't about who hits harder. It's about who understands control." "Emily, thank you," she bowed deeply. "Thank you, Sensei." But in the corner of the room, Mark's jaw tightened. He turned away, his fists clenched. After class, he waited near the locker room, pretending to pack his things. When Emily passed, he spoke without looking at her. You made quite a show out there. Emily stopped. It wasn't a show. Sensei asked me to help. Sure, he said, a bitter edge in his voice. You just seem to know a lot for someone who's never trained before. She looked at him quietly. You don't have to believe me. I'm just here to learn. Her calmness irritated him even more. Don't play innocent. You've been hiding something. Emily didn't reply. She simply turned and walked away, leaving him fuming in silence. That night, Sensei David stayed late at the dojo, reviewing security footage from classes for training records. As he watched Emily's movements frame by frame, he noticed something extraordinary. Her technique wasn't just good. It was refined. The way she shifted her weight, the timing of her counters, it was the kind of skill that took years of serious practice. He leaned back in his chair, intrigued. Who are you really, Emily? He thought. The next evening, as class ended, he called her over. Emily, he said gently, you've been very humble and I respect that. But I can see the discipline in your movements. You've trained before, haven't you? Emily hesitated. For a moment she wanted to lie again, to stay hidden, but something in his kind eyes reminded her of her father. Yes, she said finally. A long time ago. Sensei David nodded. I knew it. Whoever trained you did well, she smiled sadly. My father. He was a soldier. He taught me when I was young. I stopped after he passed away. I see, the sensei said softly. He must have been proud of you. Emily looked down. I hope so. That conversation spread quietly through the dojo, but this time it carried respect instead of gossip. People admired her story, not out of pity but because of her strength. From that day forward, things changed. The students began asking her for advice and she helped patiently, never showing off. Even Sensei David trusted her to guide beginners during warm-ups. The dojo, once a place of tension, now felt like home. But not everything was peaceful. Mark's resentment grew darker. One night, he and his friends stayed after class, talking in low voices. She's not even a black belt, one of them said. But everyone treats her like one. Mark's eyes burned with frustration. Then maybe it's time to remind everyone who runs this dojo. He didn't know it yet. But that decision would change everything. For him, for the dojo, and for Emily. Because while Mark was plotting to challenge her again, Emily was quietly preparing for something far greater. She wasn't just fighting for pride anymore. She was fighting for purpose, and that purpose, the rebirth of her strength, her peace, and her identity, was only just beginning to show its full power. The following week brought a strange silence to the dojo. Everyone sensed something brewing beneath the surface, like the calm before a storm. Emily noticed it too. The usual laughter between students was gone, replaced by hushed conversations and uneasy glances. Something in the air felt heavier. She didn't know that Mark had been planning his next move. His pride, already cracked, was now on the edge of breaking. The more respect Emily earned, the smaller he felt. For years he had been the dojo's star, the face of confidence, discipline, and skill. But now his name was whispered beside hers, always in comparison, and he couldn't stand it. On Friday evening, the dojo was busier than usual. Rumors had spread that Mark was going to settle things once and for all. Even students from other classes came to watch. The mats were spotless, the air smelled faintly of sweat and disinfectant, and a quiet buzz of anticipation filled the room. Emily arrived as she always did, calm, early, and polite. She bowed to the sensei, greeted the students, and began stretching quietly in the corner. She could feel the eyes on her, but she stayed focused, breathing slowly to steady her nerves. Mark stood across the room, pacing like a caged animal. His friends clapped him on the shoulder, whispering words of encouragement, but even they looked uneasy. When Sensei David entered, the chatter died instantly. Everyone line up, he said. We begin class with respect as always. The students bowed together, but as soon as warm-up ended, Mark stepped forward. Sensei, he said loudly, I'd like to request a full sparring session with Emily. The dojo froze. Sensei David frowned. Mark, this again? Yes, Mark insisted. Last time was practice. This time I want a real match. Emily looked up from tying her belt. Her expression didn't change, but inside her heart raced. She hadn't expected him to challenge her again. Not like this, not in front of everyone. Sensei David hesitated, then sighed. Emily, do you agree to this? She met Mark's stare. His eyes were burning with pride, maybe even anger. She thought about walking away, ending the fight before it began, but she remembered her father's words. Courage isn't running toward a fight. It's standing your ground when one finds you. She nodded slowly. Yes, Sensei. The students formed a circle around the mat. Phones were tucked away this time. No one wanted to be caught recording. The room felt sacred, heavy with silence. Remember, Sensei David said firmly, control, respect, and discipline. No unnecessary aggression. Begin when ready. Both fighters bowed. For a few seconds, neither moved. The tension was electric. Then Mark lunged forward with a strong front kick. Emily sidestepped easily, the motion smooth as flowing water. He followed with a spinning back fist, fast, sharp, but she ducked under it, letting his momentum carry him forward. The audience gasped. Emily's breathing stayed calm. She moved with precision, reacting before his strikes fully formed. Her focus was absolute. No anger, no hesitation, just clarity. Mark, on the other hand, was losing control. Every miss fueled his frustration. He swung harder, faster, sloppier. Fight me properly, he shouted, his voice echoing off the dojo walls. She said nothing. Her silence infuriated him even more. Then it happened. Mark threw a reckless punch aimed at her shoulder. Emily blocked it with one forearm, twisted his wrist with a smooth counter grip, and in one motion swept his legs from under him. He hit the mat with a dull thud. The entire room froze. Sensei David opened his mouth to intervene, but Emily had already stepped back, giving Mark space to stand. Get up, she said softly. Her tone wasn't mocking. It was calm, almost compassionate. Mark scrambled to his feet, breathing hard. His pride screamed louder than his body's pain. He charged again, trying a combination, kick, punch, elbow, but she read every move like an open book. This time, she didn't just dodge. She responded. Her movements were lightning fast, clean jabs, precise footwork, and one strong palm strike that stopped just inches from his chest. The sound of the air crackling from the force made everyone flinch. If she had followed through, it would have dropped him. Mark froze in place, eyes wide, realizing she could have ended the fight at any moment. Emily slowly lowered her hand. Control, she whispered, echoing the lesson every martial artist lives by. The dojo was silent. Even the sound of breathing felt loud. Then one by one the students began to clap. It wasn't loud at first, just soft, respectful applause. But it grew, filling the room with thunder. Mark bowed stiffly, unable to meet her eyes. His pride was shattered, but even he couldn't deny what everyone now knew. Sensei David stepped forward. That, he said, pointing to Emily, is what true strength looks like. Not aggression, not ego, calm, disciplined power. Emily bowed deeply. Thank you, Sensei. As she stepped off the mat, several students approached her. Some congratulated her quietly. Others just smiled with admiration. But one thing was clear. She had earned their respect not by force, but by grace. That night, as Emily walked home under the cool glow of the streetlights, she felt something new in her heart. Not victory, not pride, but peace. She had faced her storm and come out calm, and in the silence of that moment she realized something her father had once told her was finally true. You don't have to look fierce to be a fighter. Real strength doesn't roar. It breathes. The next few days after the fight were unlike anything the dojo had ever seen. Everyone was talking about what had happened, yet no one truly understood it. Emily had become a quiet legend within those walls. Some called her the calm storm. Others simply said, she's not normal. But to Emily, she was still just herself, a woman trying to find peace in a place that once frightened her. She arrived at class as usual, her expression gentle and humble. She bowed at the door, tied her belt, and joined the warm-up line. No one whispered this time, no smirks, no mocking laughter, only respect and curiosity. Even Mark, though his pride still stung, nodded slightly when their eyes met. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the beginning of understanding. During that class, Sensei David seemed unusually thoughtful. His eyes followed Emily as she moved, each step deliberate, each motion filled with discipline. He had seen hundreds of students in his life, but never anyone quite like her. She didn't just perform karate, she embodied it. After training ended, he asked her to stay behind. The dojo emptied slowly until it was just the two of them, standing on the mat as the evening sun poured golden light through the windows. "Emily," he began softly, "you've changed this dojo. You've reminded everyone what true martial arts is really about. But I have to ask." He paused, his tone gentle. "Who are you, really?" Emily looked down, silent for a moment. The question wasn't a surprise. It was inevitable. She sat on the mat, cross-legged, and gestured for him to do the same. "I suppose I owe you the truth, Sensei." Her voice was calm, but her eyes held a weight of memories long buried. "My father was a soldier," she began. "But before that, he was a fighter. He trained in Muay Thai, real, full-contact fighting. Not for fame, not for tournaments, but for survival." Sensei David nodded quietly. "When I was 12, he started training me. Not because he wanted me to fight," she continued, "but because he wanted me to never feel helpless. I was shy, bullied, afraid of everything. He used to tell me, 'Courage isn't being fearless, Em. It's doing what's right even when you're scared.'" She smiled faintly at the memory. "I trained with him every day, punches, kicks, balance, control. He always said that strength without kindness was just another form of weakness." Sensei listened intently, not interrupting. "One night," she said softly, "he went to help a friend in trouble. There was a street fight, illegal, dangerous. He promised he'd be home before dinner." Her voice trembled slightly. "He never came back." The room fell silent except for the faint rustle of the dojo curtains. "I quit fighting after that," she whispered. "Packed everything away. I told myself I'd never throw another punch. But the fear I once fought against came back, just in another form. I stopped living boldly. I became small again." Her fingers traced the mat gently. "Then a few months ago I walked past this dojo. I saw the students laughing, training, pushing themselves. Something inside me said, 'Go in.' I almost didn't. But I did. And now?" She exhaled, smiling softly. "Now I feel like I'm remembering who I was meant to be." Sensei David's expression softened. He bowed his head slightly. "Your father would be proud," he said quietly. "You honor him with every movement." Emily looked at him gratefully. "I hope so." For a long moment they just sat there in silence, the sunlight fading into the warm glow of evening. Finally, Sensei stood and said, "Would you allow me to tell your story to the class? Not every detail, of course, but they could learn something powerful from you." Emily thought for a moment, then nodded. "If it helps them understand that strength isn't loud or cruel, yes, you can tell them." The next day, before class began, Sensei David gathered everyone around. The students stood in a wide circle waiting. Even Mark was there, his face serious. "Before we begin," Sensei said, "I want to share something about one of our students, someone who's reminded me what true martial spirit means." He spoke gently, without revealing too much. He told them about a woman who lost her father, who stopped fighting, and who one day walked into a dojo not to win, but to heal. When he finished, the room was silent. Every eye turned toward Emily. She bowed humbly and said, "I'm not special. I just decided not to give up again." Then, from the back of the room, a slow clap began. It was Mark. Within seconds, everyone joined in. The dojo filled with the sound of respect, not for a fighter who won, but for a woman who found herself again. After class, Mark approached her quietly. "You're something else, Emily," he said awkwardly. "I didn't know." She smiled kindly. "You didn't have to. None of you did." He hesitated, then bowed. "Thank you for teaching me what strength really looks like." Emily bowed back. "We're all still learning." As the dojo lights dimmed and the night crept in, Emily stepped outside into the cool air. The city hummed softly around her. She looked up at the stars and whispered, "I did it, Dad. I found my way back." For the first time in years, her heart felt light. The fear was gone. The silence that once haunted her was now peaceful. She wasn't just Emily, the quiet woman from the bookstore anymore. She was Emily, the fierce fighter who carried her father's spirit, the courage of her past, and the peace of her present. Weeks passed and the dojo was no longer the same. Something inside its walls had changed, not just in the air but in the hearts of those who trained there. Emily's quiet strength had left a mark deeper than any punch or kick ever could. Students began to train differently. There was less competition, less showing off, and more focus on patience, respect, and understanding. Even the black belts who once measured power by noise and speed now moved with quiet control, as if they were learning to breathe again. Emily continued to come to class every week, still humble, still calm. She never talked about her victories. She didn't need to. Her presence spoke louder than words. When new students arrived, nervous, shy, or insecure, she was the first to greet them with a warm smile. "Don't worry," she would say gently. "Everyone starts somewhere. Just take your time." Soon she became a quiet mentor. Sensei David noticed how beginners naturally gathered around her, how her soft-spoken encouragement seemed to lift their confidence more than any strict correction ever could. One evening he approached her after class. "Emily," he said, "you've become more than a student here. You've become an example." She smiled shyly. "I'm just doing what my father did for me, helping others believe they can be strong." Sensei nodded. "That's what real martial artists do. They don't just train, they inspire." Word about Emily's story continued to spread quietly. A few parents brought their daughters to the dojo after hearing about the ordinary woman who stood up to black belts. Some women came just to watch, unsure if they could do what she did. Emily always welcomed them kindly, showing them simple self-defense moves and teaching them to trust their instincts. One Saturday afternoon, a teenage girl named Lily joined the dojo. She was small, timid, and barely spoke above a whisper. During her first class, she froze every time someone raised a hand to spar with her. After class, Emily approached her. "You did well," she said softly. "I messed up," Lily muttered, looking at the floor. "Everyone's better than me," Emily smiled. "You sound like me when I started." "Do you know what my first lesson was?" Lily shook her head. "Don't be afraid to look weak. Strength doesn't start in your muscles, it starts here." She placed her hand gently over her heart. "Every time you stand back up, you're already winning." From that day on, Lily followed Emily like a shadow, and under her guidance, she slowly bloomed. She became faster, stronger, and more confident, not just in karate, but in herself. One evening, after class, as Emily watched Lily spar with another student, Sensei David approached her again. "Do you see what you've done?" he asked quietly. Emily tilted her head. "What do you mean?" he smiled. "You've turned your pain into purpose. You've built something lasting. You've given people courage." She looked around the dojo, the laughter, the respect, the shared focus, and realized he was right. What began as one woman's attempt to heal herself had become something much bigger. Later that night, as the dojo emptied and the lights dimmed, Emily stayed behind. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. She bowed once more to the mat, a gesture of gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. Not to the room, but to her father, to her younger self, to every step that led her here. Outside, the evening breeze brushed against her face. The city lights shimmered, but Emily felt a deeper glow within. She thought about how far she had come, from a simple woman who walked into a dojo trembling with fear, to a fighter who inspired others to stand tall. A few weeks later, the dojo organized a small charity event for women's self-defense awareness. Sensei David asked Emily to lead the session. She hesitated at first. Public speaking had never been her strength, but she agreed. That day, the dojo was packed. Women of all ages sat cross-legged on the mat, curious and expectant. Emily stood before them, her white GI crisp, her posture calm. She began softly. "When I first joined this dojo, I was terrified. I didn't come here to fight anyone, I came here to stop fighting myself." The The room was silent, every eye fixed on her. I learned that strength isn't about hurting others. It's about not letting fear control you. It's about standing back up no matter how many times you fall. Her voice grew steadier, filled with quiet conviction. You don't need to look fierce to be strong. You don't need to be loud to be brave. You just have to believe that you're worth standing up for. When she finished, the entire room erupted in applause. Some women had tears in their eyes. Even Sensei David, standing at the back, bowed his head respectfully. That night, as Emily locked up the dojo, she looked once more at the mats where her journey had begun. She could almost hear her father's voice again, gentle, proud, echoing in her heart. You found your balance, Em? She smiled. I finally did. The moonlight spilled through the windows, bathing the dojo in silver light. And there, under its glow, stood a woman who had turned her fear into fire, her silence into strength, and her pain into purpose. She had come to learn karate, but in the end, she had learned life, and that was her true victory.